Alright, both recording devices are on. As already tested, both of them are working, and we will not have an issue where I forget to set speakers on. So, we are good.
Yay.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am sure I made sure to check before recording.
Sparta, I'm not trying to be that guy, but you...
I know, I have a history.
You weren't.
Anyway, hello
Hey,
everyone, this
it
is Sparta
happens at
Lycos
least
of
once.
Lycos Gaming. With us today are
Oh, my.
Joe The Hellhound from Joe The Hellhound. Shadow, Foil, and
Hi.
Castiel is sort of here, but Shadow, you want to explain?
Broke his mic yet again.
So, someone's gonna have to be reading off the chat for him.
Not it.
Not it.
Not it. Oh wait, shit.
I'm the death
I
player,
am
we're
it.
all kind of screwed.
No one
Yeah,
in the
you don't
chat.
have him on the
Please,
friends
Sparta.
list and you're not in the... Damn. Okay, I'll be trying to read off Castiel's thing. Hopefully I don't fuck it up. Anyway, today's topic...
Oh, you will, and it will be glorious.
Anyway, today's topic is linear versus adaptive games.
Stories.
Games, stories.
Stories, yeah.
Stories are a major
No,
part
those
of
are
games.
vastly different. Well, story is the thing. An adaptive game could be a game that changes its experience to match the player, i.e. Left 4 Dead, which would be an entirely different concept.
Alright, fair point. Okay, so, anyone want to start to the conversation? The ball is in anyone's court.
I could start.
Alright, Joe.
But first, I'm going to say this. In no way have I accidentally forgot to hit the record button during a podcast before, so you're not alone on that. But we're starting this with the linear versus adaptive kind of gameplay. So the world that changes around you versus this is our world, this is what's going on, boom, boom, boom. Right?
Yeah, this is our world, this is
Right.
our story. It goes, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens.
Okay. I'm going to come at this from a perspective as a person who plays an unhealthy amount of video games and a person who is currently
That's
running
all of
a
us.
who is currently
Right.
running a D&D game and who participates in said D&D games. So, when it comes to the gaming aspect, from what I understand, having a more open experience is usually a bit more fun. But it basically boils down to how the players are, because some people really like a linear experience, get from point A, point B, done. But for other players, which is another section of it, they like being able to go, okay, here's point A to point B, now here's point A to point C, which changes point B, and then it branches off into a multitude of other things. Like, I would say the best way to describe it, that kind of experience, was Fallout New Vegas. So many different things you could do boiled down and changed the end aspect of that game. Like, there was a bad ending, there was a good ending, there was a neutral ending, and then there was everything in between you could do that changed the outcome of the world around you.
You actually make a really good point, but one of my issues with this, though, is, the individual actions within New Vegas didn't really change the world much until the end of the game.
Yeah, but that was how New Vegas was currently at the time. Older games didn't really have that technology to be able to, drastically change what was happening.
Fable.
But to be
Yeah.
fair, Peter Molyneux kind of screwed itself because from what he wanted to do versus what could happen.
Yeah, he outright lied a lot.
Yeah. Like, this world's gonna be so vast, is that an invisible wall?
When there's clearly
5 hours
land
of
behind
fun.
it and not a mountain?
Yeah.
Fable was really ambitious for what it was even, but it was
yeah.
nowhere near what they promised.
But yeah, no, Fable is a very good core concept for how that could be. But even then, it did railroad you in two directions,
Yeah.
where it was the good or the bad ending.
Pretty much. I actually hate it when games have a straight-up good or bad karma decision. Like, as much as I love Mass Effect, I hate Paragon Renegade. Because it just boils down to, this was obviously the good, this was obviously the bad. And if you're going to have an adaptive story, there needs to be as many shades of gray as possible.
You know, we're missing one of the bigger games that this could go with.
Mass Effect?
Jade Empire.
Yes.
Was that
if
along
you're
the
talking
lines of
like
the Dynasty Warriors type stuff? Or am I thinking of something else?
That was
Kinda,
BioWare
sorta, not really.
does. BioWare does a martial arts epic
yeah.
Oh,
RPG.
sorry, I'm used to hearing
And
like
it is
anything
amazing.
like so-and-so Empire. It usually ties into a different studio.
Have you never played Jade Empire?
I've heard of it, but then again, each time I pull up anything
need to
on
play
it gets buried by like a crap load of stuff that's related to Dynasty Warriors.
Yeah, ignore the Dynasty War. It's backwards compatible. Go download it now.
Right?
I would, but you guys
Not
like
only
talking
does
to me,
Jade
right?
Empire... Not only does Jade Empire do way better at what it was than you would expect, the combat feels a little dated, just because it was ambitious. It's got probably the single greatest plot twist in gaming history.
Are we talking like a J.J. Abrams plot twist, or are we talking
I'm
like a M. Night
talking-
Shyamalan plot?
I'm talking
Twist.
less hints than I See Dead People.
Okay, M. Night.
Wait, I thought
Good
he was
episode.
a shitty director.
He used to be good.
Okay.
Yes,
He
he
still
did.
has a few good hits every now and again. It's like he's not there
No,
all the
he
time.
has Split. That's it. That's all he has in recent memory.
Split was good. But then again, he hasn't directed a lot of shit recently, so...
Yeah, I mean, the last
Because-
thing I know...
you know
he
why?
recorded-
Because no
he
one
did-
wants to give him money. Because he made such shit.
I mean, last thing I remember him even doing before that recent movie that turned out to be actually pretty damn good was the Avatar Last Airbender movie, and oh my god, any fan of Avatar Last Airbender cried when they saw that.
I didn't know anything
Yeah.
about the source material, but about the point I was supposed
All
to
I
take
have to say
Asif
is
Manvi
Ong.
seriously, it was over.
You
I need a
Joe?
serious character. Let's hire the guy from the Daily
Are we
Show.
talking about the live-action Avatar movie?
Yes, that.
Yes.
It was so bad.
I know.
Well, here's the thing. The main person who played Aang wanted to dip.
Okay, I did not hear about that, but anyway.
Oh yeah, that movie's an entire tragedy on its own. But most anime live action adaptations are like that, as we managed to get off topic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we get
I
off
was about to
topic.
mention
Clark.
we
But
probably
welcome
should
to
get
the
back on
talks, man.
topic.
Yeah.
Well, hold on, he's been in the talks before, at least once.
Once.
Has he with
Then
us?
I-
Okay. To bring it back, Jade Empire is a fantastic example of BioWare becoming what it became. Like, you can see a lot of things that made BioWare famous in Mass Effect and Dragon Age being tested for the first time in Jade Empire. The bringing the companions with you, having a party camp where you can just go have conversations. They did an interesting take on good or evil. I still don't like the idea of a morality system that still gives you the idea of this was a good or bad choice.
But see,
I
that's
like
the
the
thing
idea
I
of
love
having to
about
sit on
Jade
your
Empire is
consequences.
some of them weren't clear-cut good and evil. Some of them were just your moral stance on the situation, not whether it was actually a good move or a bad move.
Well, now that I think
Right.
about it, it's like Metro, even though Metro 2033 and Last Light were very much railroad, there was some decisions
Yeah,
that
they
were
were.
just there that were very great. You weren't sure if it was good, you weren't sure if it was bad, and same could be said about Fallout 3, 4,
That
and
actually
New
played
Vegas.
into which ending you got. So Metro
still,
is an
it's like
example of a relatively railroaded.
Well, I
Sometimes
said it was
literally
a very
railroaded.
railroaded. It was a very railroaded experience.
Well,
Literally,
But what was
about
it?
you
There
walked on
is
railroads.
There is something I want to say about New Vegas really quick. There was sorry, Sparta, but there was a quest where you had to help this farmer and you had to go into a vault. And pretty much the vault's reactor cracked and it's leaking radiation into the soil, the water, and things like that. And it's one of the few quests where there is no straight up good or bad karma
no good or
tied
bad
to it.
karma.
Yeah.
It just leaves you to sit there and decide and live with yourself.
You find out that there are
end.
survivors. Yeah, there is survivors in the vault, but gives you the choice at the end, which both could be relatively perceived as good, or both could be perceived as relatively bad.
Castiel wants
Fallout
to chime
4
in.
really isn't linear, though, Castiel.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Alright, Castiel said Fallout 4 is a good example of a bad linear story. It's really not linear, though, Castiel. You, at no point, are railroaded into doing anything in 4.
Yeah, I mean, for
depending on the
example, you can
things you
choose
do.
to side with the Institute or the Railroad.
Okay, Sparta, picking a faction itself
but I
is
mean,
not that
there's
much. It's just
people
picking
are-
a railroad.
I know.
But,
I'm
I
actually
mean, it's
gonna-
possible to stop in the middle of these storylines, kill off an entire opposing faction before you finish the storyline.
He means the main story path, which.
Okay,
Could
if
be-
you're going that route, almost every game would be considered a linear story, dude.
Yeah.
You're not pushed into doing the main story one right after another. You can fuck off and do other shit. You can.
I will say this though, to slightly side with Castiel. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how you
Castiel.
pronounce his name.
All right.
If you want to piss him off, call him Cassie.
Yeah.
I've
To sum
never
it up,
heard anyone
out of
call
all
him
the
that
Fallout,
before.
out of
'Cause he gets
all the
pissed.
Fallout games, 4 was by far the most linear. Compared to the stuff you could do in 3, the stuff you could do in New Vegas, and then compared to the other Fallout games were just very open-ended.
Yeah.
4 was pretty much base game without mods. It was pretty much choose your faction, go through your faction, get your son.
Mm-hmm.
And several of those, I think the 3 of them, Railroad, Brotherhood, and Minutemen, all ended in destroying the Institute.
Yep.
The only time when things relatively changed is if you decided to side with the Institute, but it still ended up with you. Excuse me. It still sided with you getting your son.
Right. Well,
And ending it that way.
I will say this: I've heard somewhere that there is a way to side with all 4 of them at the end, but it's a very, very strict set of circumstances for you to even
It's a
pull it
glitch.
off. Ah, really?
It is actually viewed as a glitch because of what happens is that for the Railroad, you're hunting down remnants of the Brotherhood. For the Brotherhood, you're hunting down remnants of the Railroad. And then Minutemen, it's protect your damn settlement.
Right. Or settlements, depending on how many
And
you
if-
had at that point.
Or settlements, yeah. Mm-hmm. See, the issue with Fallout 4 in comparison to, say, other Fallout games is that, and this goes with Bethesda in general with their things, no matter what you do in the main core of the game, you always end up being the good guy to a degree, or the somewhat bad guy. I'm gonna take the end quest out of Fallout 3. When John Henry Eden gives you the stuff to, I don't know, kill off 90% of the mutants in the East Coast DC area. And it's okay, here it is. There's no real repercussion. Outside the fact that at the end, you just kind of get scolded by the narrator.
But doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, that's a moral choice. Not all morality has a real
Clear cut.
Yeah,
well, it's never really clear
consequence.
cut, but that's kind of how Bethesda's kind of known for doing their stuff. It's like, here's the good ending, here's the bad ending. They're good, depending on how it's written, it can be very morally gray. Which Bethesda's really good at doing that.
We're dumping way too much time into one specific franchise, I feel like.
Yeah,
Well,
but
not only that,
it's just a
one
good
specific aspect as well.
I'm going to say this. Most stories, even in adaptive games, you still leave being the somewhat good guy for the sole reason that the story has to have a specific constraint. It's not... They don't just dump you in a world and say, do whatever. The story is, you have an end goal. The story is you achieving the end goal. The adaptation is how different decisions you make along the way change the ending or change the world in order to get the ending. A good example would be the first Dragon Age game. You have to stop the Blight. That is your end goal. The methods you take change the world. They change the future for later games. They change everything. But no matter what, you stop the Blight.
right.
Alistair,
an
you slept
example
for
would
Morgan
be,
for a good cause.
Like an example would be when you have to go help out the elves, and you have the choice of helping out the elves or helping out the elves that were turned into werewolves.
Mm-hmm.
You have to acquire armies to stop the Blight. They don't care how you do it. They don't care how you or who you bring. That is just the way a story has to go. Even an adaptive story has to have a goal. Otherwise, you're just wandering the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now
That is part of why Andromeda was such a shit show.
Well, that and the amount of bugs, the glitches, the my face hurts.
On a story perspective, although, a significant part of why Andromeda was such a shit show is your goal was, hey, make this place livable. When your goal should have been, hey, explore.
To be
You are a
fair, though,
pathfinder,
and-
but nothing you pathfind hasn't been pathfound already.
Yeah. It's like you kind of like it's like here's my job. Oh, my job's already done for me. Well, oh no.
And it's as bad as someone playing Civ and sending a scout through the same path another scout had already been.
Like, hey, see if the previous hundreds of people who've been here missed something.
Yeah. That's very much the cause and effect of it. I feel bad that Andromeda kind of got shafted because that series had some promise to it, and we could have seen some pretty interesting things come out of it, especially coming out of coming from one of those storyline perspectives.
But unfortunately,
I feel like-
now.
It was rushed out, and then it was dropped like a fucking sack of rocks.
Well, I
Well,
can
not
also
only
point out,
was it
it wasn't just
Not only
rushed,
was it rushed,
the
like the
developers
development
literally
was cut
said,
up into
"We'll fix
pieces and
it."
set to different areas.
Yeah, they
Developers-
literally said, well, Mass Effect 1 was a buggy mess, so we'll just put out a buggy mess and then fix it in the sequel. When the original
But the writing
Andromeda
didn't
project wasn't even
compensate like
supposed... No. And the original
that writing was
and the original plan for Andromeda wasn't to have a sequel, it was a standalone.
Mm-hmm. No, they were planning a series of games behind it. That was the problem.
No, originally there were. Or it was originally supposed to be BioWare does No Man's Sky correctly, actually. That was the original
Yeah.
plan for Andromeda.
Well, that backfired.
Yep.
Yes, because greed came into the equation, and they said, no, we'll make a franchise. And since we're going to make a franchise, the first game can suck. It doesn't matter.
And then they completely drop it.
Actually,
Yeah.
speaking of adaptive gameplay, have you guys seen not Andromeda? Fuck. No Man's
Unfortunately,
Sky.
I have seen
you
Andromeda.
seen like what No Man's Sky has done?
I've seen a lot of
better.
positive from when it launched.
I like
All I've
from
seen
how it is
of
standing
it
today.
is Kit and his kids playing the hell out of it and praising the game nonstop.
To be fair, where the game
Castiel,
is
I was
now,
about
I
to
could
say
see.
the same thing.
Yeah. Where the game is now, I can see why people are going to love it so much. Of course, the game had its diehard fans. But now it's got actual multiplayer behind it. It's got so much stuff that was supposed to be there at the beginning.
But to get back to stories, Castiel brought up a point.
Castiel actually made a good point. The Witcher 2 and 3 are good examples of adaptive stories as well, arguably more than any of BioWare's works. And to a point, I actually fucking agree, because BioWare...
The Witcher...
Slavic magic.
The Witcher does a really good job of actually changing everything. So, for instance, at the end of an area, you might be forced to pick a choice or make a choice between two characters. The other one permadies. They're not coming back.
To sum it up, I would have to say, like, I would agree with you, Castiel, that Witcher definitely succeeded at doing that. And I would have to say that's kind of what Peter Molyneux wanted with Fable.
I'm going to actually pull back a bit with Witcher 3, though. Because Witcher 3, there are things you do that sound like they'll be world-shattering, and they really don't affect much. You can kill the king, and the soldiers still yell for Radovid when you fight them. It doesn't change anything. Nothing ever changes, except maybe a character dies and doesn't talk to you anymore.
That's actually a pretty fair point.
One game I'd like to throw into the BioWare pile, I haven't played it before, and I could be wrong on the developer's name, but one of the Star Wars games that came out on the Xbox original.
Old Republic.
Yeah, that's it. Old Republic. And I think Old Republic 2.
Old Republic's great, but in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty fucking linear.
Was it? I could have sworn
Like, I'm a huge fan
There's
of the
two paths.
Old Republic.
There's two paths. You pick path A or path B.
Yeah, you're either dark side or light side, that's it.
But isn't that with most Star Wars stuff?
Yeah,
To be completely honest. Like, you can have a very open-ended Star Wars game, and you're still very limited to, like, especially if you're playing a Jedi, or, like, a Force user, it's either, oh, hey, you're the Sith, you're either a gray Jedi, or you are a straight-up Jedi. Either way, you're a space wizard.
Yep.
Adaptive story only works if there's really multiple branching outcomes. Things like just picking option A or B is one of my issues with, like, Fable. You either made a good hero or a bad hero. For the most part, that's all there is.
Bro, my hero would be super swole.
Because if you go neutral,
I
the world doesn't change at all.
See, one of the things I find interesting about Fable, though, is you can be, like, a complete bastard on the evil side and still do, like,
bro, it's all about the
right
donations
for the kingdom.
Yeah, you could say that with Fable 3.
Castiel agreed with me. Fable. The Witcher 3 really just changes the narrative a little bit, not a ton. The Witcher 2 going from Witcher 2 going into 3 is the bigger deal. In the same way that Mass Effect 1, if you make vastly different decisions, you don't see the outcomes till Mass Effect 2 or 3.
Yeah, but that's kind of how those games were, like, set up. It's like, oh, hey, here's this quest, here's this mission, and then, depending on your actions of the last game, this is how it affects space politics.
Now, can I drag this back a bit? Because we've all talked about different ways we can change things. We haven't talked about the linear side of stories. Because I am of the personal view that unless your name is BioWare, if you want the best storylines are always the linear ones. They always do a better job with character growth. They do a better job with plot twists. They just feel more thematic. They feel more complete. It doesn't feel like you're going to leave and say, but that one decision I make that voided that. Unless you're BioWare, because BioWare can somehow make it work.
Here's my little spit on it. Linear stories are good for a decent story. Like, I'm gonna take Halo's 1 through 3 as an example. It's a very self-contained linear story. You're following in the shoes of the Chief throughout near the end of the Covenant War. This is your character. This is what's going on. Follow the story. Shit. Lovely cutscenes. Go shoot shit. Yeah. The adaptive storylines, especially when it gives you more choices like BioWare,
that will be brought up.
It allows you to build your own personal character. It allows you to it makes it more along the lines of you.
It's the difference between inserting yourself in a story and witnessing someone's story.
Yeah. It's like a choose your own adventure book versus a normal book.
Well, I will say this, a lot of that, regardless of whether it's a linear story or not, depends on the writing.
That is true.
And what's available for you to do within the game world.
Well, Castiel
yeah, because if you a silent attack,
Spec Ops.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. I know enough. I can explain that. But
yeah, that's actually a good.
Yeah, that's a great one to bring up.
Actually, a very good linear story.
A good linear story is really easy to find. Just look for something named Final Fantasy that isn't 13. Or look for anything Japanese, basically.
I would
anything
say
Japanese.
Titanfall 2. Titanfall 2 had a very good linear story.
Did it?
Oh, kind of. Like...
It made me feel for a robot, if that made any sense.
Well, to be fair, Halo kind of made you feel, I guess, a little bit for Cortana.
I'm going to say this. Most shooters' stories are that they're good and that they're like a nice action movie set piece. When I think of a really amazing linear story, I think like there were 3 points in that game where it was hard not to cry, and each of one of those characters feels like a real person, where if you threw them into any situation, I feel like I know their personality and how they would respond. But before we forget him, Castiel brought up Spec Ops: The Line. And Spec Ops: The Line is one of the ultimate examples of a linear story that mindfucks you so hard.
Yeah.
So if you're not aware, that game story sounds so simple. You're just a group of special ops soldiers trying to go hunt down and rescue a dude in a country that's in the middle of a civil war. That sounds basic as fuck shooter, and that's all it is for the majority of the game. Until you get to the end and realize your character has actually been slowly disconnecting with reality, and you have been committing war crimes without realizing it. You phosphorus gassed a bunch of civilians. People you thought you were enemies weren't. And then when your soldiers turn on you, there's like 6 potential endings, everywhere from killing yourself to deciding all of your crew has seen too much and killing them all to keep your secret.
I would say another one that was pretty decent was one of it was one of the Army of Two games.
Which describes the story.
I'm trying to remember, but basically, to sum it up, the original partner you had to shoot.
Devil's Cartel.
Yep.
That game had a surprisingly good story.
Yes, it does.
It wasn't the predictable shooter-esque thing you were expecting. Obviously, Rio surviving in a fucking tutorial was pretty expected. Even him being the bad guy wasn't that big a plot twist. But the way they casually, brutally murdered the girl that all the story was based on just fucking blew my mind. Like, the entire story was about originally saving her, and then years later, she's your contact helping you through a new fight. She's with you the whole time, and then he just comes to you, and he's holding her, and you're like, okay, so we're going to have a nice talk and try to... Oh my god, he just executed her.
Why did you do that? You broke a perfectly good person!
Like, oh my god, just like that. No.
Why did you do this?
Because I'm a dick.
It is one of
Shoot
those.
me.
It's one of those rare times when someone you used to be able to play as, they manage to not only turn into a bad guy or a moral gray area. One of the few times they manage to make you want to kill a character you used to be the avatar, or that used to be your avatar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of it. Have any of you played Dark Souls in general?
Yes.
Never touched
Yes.
it.
Boyle
Never
has
want to
only
touch
played
it. Never
all
even
of the
want to go
Dark
near
Souls
it.
in his life.
If you were to take the time, Dark Souls has a very overarching story between the 3 games. Even 2, even though
Still
2
says
is
he
kind
has
of,
played it.
Still's played the fuck time.
But depending on how you do things and look at things, it affects the story in Dark Souls 3. Like, in Dark Souls 3, you're learning about the waning of fire and everything else, and there's always several options at the end you can do. One of them is continuing...
I think Dark Souls has a very well done story, but it's well done for a reason other than what most people would think, because a lot of the story is intentionally hidden and you're supposed to piece it together.
Yeah. And I'm going to say thank you, lore videos, for endless amounts of describing shit that I would never understand any other way.
Alright, one example I can think of in that category is something Kit talked about,
because a lot of that...
okay,
personal.
we're all going at once.
Right. So, I'll go ahead and bring
What
up the
I
thing.
was going to say... Okay, I'll give me, you then Foil, okay?
Alright.
So what I was going to say is finding hidden lore itself is actually something I like, but there still needs to be a feeling of an actual complete story. Otherwise, it's just meaningless. Like, reading all the shit on the walls in Left 4 Dead is interesting, but Left 4 Dead doesn't have a good plot just because they have hidden lore. The plot still has to feel like something that matters, even if you may not have understood bits and pieces of it. Finding the truth is actually good. It feels like you're completing things. A good example would be Final Fantasy VII. Half of the past of Final Fantasy VII is hidden. It's in hidden cutscenes. It's in books that you may or may not have read. It has to be pieced together. A lot of it has to be done a second playthrough to fully comprehend. But the rest of the game still feels like a complete story. You still get everyone's backstory. You still understand everyone's motivations. They still have plot twists that work. Every character feels fully realized, for lack of a better word. Yeah. It's not like other games where if you want to really understand what's going on sometimes, you have to just sit there and fucking lore video or search. Like an example would be the Elder Scrolls franchise. The story itself doesn't seem that interesting because it's always on a crux of you understanding everything going on in the background. So if you played Oblivion as your first one, you truly didn't understand what Mehrunes Dagon's limits were, what a Daedric Prince can or cannot do. So the entire story relying on him doesn't really feel like it has the same weight because it just, while they aren't playing it fast and loose and there is a strict rule set, you don't know it. So it feels like they're just making it up as they go.
I could see that.
Sparta, you were next.
Well, I was going to bring up something on the topic of hidden lore in the Dark Souls game. Primarily about a certain ring that had something to do with the large wolf boss. Or some item.
The Civ?
I think so. According to Kit, from what he had told me before, the story for that particular wolf actually carries on into the second game, and I really don't remember where I was
it's not
going
even
with
that. There's a whole DLC about that. Literally.
Right, but it's all tied around one particular thing. I can't remember if it's a ring or a weapon or armor that had some flavor text that pretty much explains what is going on with that particular boss.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's kind of a common theme in Dark Souls.
Yeah, really?
Within the Dark Souls series in general, or Souls series, or Souls types games in general, they leave you very much to figure out what's going on. Because the idea behind the Souls games is that you are chosen to do this thing. You can either go through and do this thing, or you could take your time and find out what's happening. The Souls games are also known for having quests that you can either unknowingly start or unknowingly end horribly. I'm so sorry, Andre.
Yeah, he's not wrong.
The big thing behind it is that as you go and choose to do these things, and you find out the stories and things behind the characters, the big one for Dark Souls 3, I would have to say, actually two big ones would be, well, who was it, Siegfried or was it Sigmire? I think it was Siegfried.
Sigmire.
Is this Onion Bro?
Siegfried was one.
It is. It's one of the Onion Bros. It's the Onion Bro of Onion Bros. It's like,
don't even ask.
I'm going to ask.
Sound like a fucking onion.
What?
He
like
literally
Katrina
fights
armor.
alongside you, and he looks like a giant fucking onion, gained sentience, and decided, I am here for you, random person. Let's do this.
He is probably one of the best characters next to Solaire. Because you're sitting there, and the first time you really run into him, you're in, what was it, Undead Settlement?
Yeah.
And you're going to this tower, and he pretty much shows you how the first, trick elevator works. And as you go up, you can hear him again, and you can roll off the tower, and he's sitting there staring at a big F-off demon, going, that's really scary. I could help you fight this. And then you could trigger the fight, and he's like, no, you should have waited. And then you obviously kill the demon, and progress the story from there. But it's little things like that Dark Souls managed to do. That just made, you unknowingly, started a quest. And as you go through, you can help him and do other things. There's a section in it where you go apart to a cathedral, and at a certain point, he's trapped in a well without his armor. And you can hear him in the well, but you could choose to ignore him and let him die in the well. Which
is
be
entirely easy to not even realize he's in the well.
Yeah. You just hear him go, And that's as you're going by the well.
Really?
But I will also say something Dark Souls does well is the overarching story, the linking of the flame and what these, in the first game, the gods, and in the later games, the what do I want to call them? The Embers of the Flame?
The
Lords of the Flame?
Cinder.
Yeah. I mean, the overarching story is, this is the power that's helped them free themselves in the beginning, but you're eventually, at the end of the game, if you just go blindly through and you complete it, Link the Flame, you're just prolonging malignant power. I mean, Dark Souls did really well with it, even if it is really hidden. And then just some of the interactions between some of the Lords of Flame is horrible.
Well,
for instance,
sorry. Go ahead.
You want to say something, Sparta?
No, go ahead. Finish what you were saying.
Well, I was going to say, some of them became what they are just through, circumstance and, I don't want to say pettiness, but, their emotions led them to the place where they made the choices they made and became what they became.
Well, what was it? Yorm the Giant, he did it out of wanting to protect his people.
Yeah. Well, I was
then when he
thinking
came
like
back, they
Osiris,
despised
who
him.
went mad from fucking his child.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he did screw his child.
He did, but I mean, it drove him mad, the guilt.
Well, no, he made an abomination trying to do whatever. There wasn't actually supposed to be a baby coded into Dark Souls 3 that he
Yeah, I know.
killed. But the thing was, he was so obsessed with trying to make a human-dragon hybrid thing to go about it. He finally had this one child that made him... He eventually went mad trying to create it. His own wife left him. And you see him, when you actually find him in the game, he doesn't have the baby coded, it's not coded into the game, but he's holding something, and then you go through it, and then he flips out and smashes said child.
Huh.
As he tries to kill you.
And
The
just
entire story behind
as a-
Osiris is...
Just as a side note on this, that may have originally been in a game and they removed it for
Yeah, because it was a bit
other
much.
reasons. Yeah. Like, the audio files and the animations are still there, it's just the baby isn't.
You can hear the baby crying from, like...
Yeah.
As soon as you enter the area, you hear the baby crying.
Alright, well, we have reached the 40-minute mark. Anyone else have anything they want to bring up real quick before we go ahead and end out here?
I don't feel like we've accomplished anything.
Wasn't there, like, another topic we were supposed to talk about?
Yes, but that's for the
Okay.
next recording.
Oh.
To be fair, that one would be a relatively short, like...
It would be more of like a spin-off, an aftermath kind of a deal.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, the Nerd Talks are now going to be 30 to 40 minutes. 20 if we really
Barter
don't have
doesn't
that
like
much.
listening to us talk that long.
I enjoy listening to y'all talk. It's just the ones that were hours long, no one really watched that much of.
I made it through some of them.
I did too.
Start trying to find a good
Even though I
audience
was
for a
Stop watching.
podcast. I'll fully admit this.
What was that?
I'll fully admit it's hard trying to get a podcast going on a channel.
Yeah. But I figured it'd be something
Trial
that
and
would be
error.
interesting for people.
Mhm.
What's going to be more interesting is when I
I know.
get Kit, Shadow, and Foil together for a political talk at some point. Probably closer to the elections,
Oh.
but that's going to be
Oh,
interesting.
Oil will destroy everyone.
Oh god, talk about fucking hellfire!
Yep. And that will be a thing.
Have you
just
seen
need
the
to-
previous Nerd Talks where we get political, man?
Oh, fuck.
We
I tend to avoid
go
political
hard.
conversations.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I stay informed. I go hard.
It's
I
pretty
don't care.
damn,
I don't care if I have to destroy someone to get my point across. I will do it.
it's pretty damn
Actually-
long when you guys go onto a political rant. Which is why I'm thinking about doing them as a separate thing and keeping them out of the normal Nerd Talks.
That's a fair point.
But, I
Because
mean,
doing a political talk can easily get from like 0 to 100 and eat up an entire section.
right.
Yeah.
But that's for future. We will get to that when we cross
We
that
don't-
bridge.
We don't get angry.
No.
If anything, we just get more retrospective. Then we have to sit there and go, "Fuck! If I'm gonna counter that point, give me a second. I have to remember some names and dates, and exact quotes."
Right?
And the sad thing is, I can't say anything because I suck at arguing my points in political talk.
I mean, if you really want to get topical, we could say "fuck" the other topic we were gonna have and start talking about Kavanaugh.
Jesus
we
Christ.
could, I guess. I
Oh
mean,
god, no, please, let's not.
You know,
speaking of political
about
stuff,
this,
I'm going to bring up memes. Have you guys got that presidential alert?
All right, well...
Yeah, what
you
the
mean,
fuck was that? I actually didn't know what that was for.
It's
that
was
supposed to be
a test.
like
It was a test.
warning system.
Or
But no,
the
man, you
beginning
should
of the
see the
first
memes that
annual
have come
purge.
out of
We
this.
couldn't tell
Oh,
what.
fuck.
You gotta love the memes. It's like they're completely shitting on them, but it's like presidential alert. The Oval Office is out of bread. Let's see here. Presidential alert. How do I build a wall in Fortnite?
Oh my god.
Presidential alert. Stormy Daniels threesome. Presidential alert right after that. Oops, disregard that. America, that was definitely not Google. I sent that by mistake. Big mistake. Huge.
Presidential alert. Someone please get me some cafefe.
Presidential alert. Why don't Minecraft work?
Presidential
Presidential
alert.
alert.
This
How
has
do
been
I
Lycos
download more
Gaming.
RAM?
Thank you for watching. We will catch you next time. The next one might be a
Download
political
more
one.
RAM. Invest in
I will talk about
Dogecoin.
Kavanaugh right now. Let's do this.
Wait. Please wait for me to save this file and get set up for another record session. And also, if you want, we can bring Kit into
Because
this
a lot
if
of
you
people
want to.
don't understand. Now, a lot of people don't understand. This would be the time to make sure everyone knows exactly what just happened. Because the
Okay.
politics have gone over
All
many
right.
ahead.